Okay, so you've really piled it on this time, huh? A whole stack of stuff about nice guys.
Yeah, it looks like we're going deep on this nice guy syndrome thing.
Straight from the source, Dr. Robert Glover himself.
No more Mr. Nice Guy, right?
That's the one. And you're looking for the cheat sheet, the condensed version?
Basically, yeah. All the insights without getting lost in the weeds.
So no slogging through every single page, just the good stuff, the core concepts. I think we can do that.
I think so too. We've got excerpts here that lay out the whole thing. Dr. Glover's ideas, stories from his practice, all that.
Like how society plays into it, right?
Exactly. And crucially, what people can actually do about it.
All right, so mission one, let's distill this down. What is this nice guy syndrome at its core? Where does it even come from?
And how does it show up in a guy's life, in his relationships?
Right. And most importantly, what's the roadmap out? What does the book say about actually changing?
Sounds like a plan. So to get started, let's really nail down how Dr. Glover defines a nice guy in the first place.
Yeah, because it's not just about being polite, right?
No, it's deeper than that.
Yeah.
It's like these men are almost programmed, conditioned to seek approval from others constantly.
So they're always trying to look good, do the right thing.
Exactly. Their happiness is tied to keeping other people happy.
Which can be exhausting, I imagine.
You bet. They become conflict avoidant, like to the extreme.
So they bend over backwards to please everyone.
Yeah. And there's often this huge emphasis on pleasing women specifically.
Okay. And they want to be seen as like the anti-jerk, the opposite of the bad boy.
Exactly. But the core of it is this flawed belief. If I'm good, if I give enough, then love and happiness will just magically appear.
Which, spoiler alert, it doesn't.
Not quite. So the big question is, where does this pattern come from?
Right, because you don't just wake up one day and decide to be a nice guy.
Well, the book emphasizes that this isn't just a few isolated cases Dr. Glover stumbled upon.
He saw this over and over again.
Yeah, in his practice over 2 decades, it became clear it was a much bigger social phenomenon.
Huh. And it's interesting because this book is clearly written from a male perspective.
Yeah, it's meant to help men, but what's really fascinating is how many women have found it insightful too.
Like to understand the men in their lives.
Exactly, their partners, their fathers, even themselves.
Okay, so back to the origins. Where does Dr. Glover say this starts?
He traces it back to childhood, specifically what he calls abandonment experiences.
Okay, so I'm already thinking, like, literally being abandoned by a parent.
It can be that, but it's broader than that. It's really about any experience where a child feels a loss of love, of attention, of connection from those crucial caregivers.
So it's not always intentional on the parents' part.
Right. Sometimes it's just the realities of life. Parents get stressed, they make mistakes, they're not perfect.
But kids are egocentric, right? So they see everything as revolving around them.
Totally. So if parents angry or distant or just not available, the child might internalize that as their fault. Like if I were better, they wouldn't be like this.
And that blame, that self-criticism, that can really stick with you.
It can become ingrained. And that's where toxic shame comes in. It's not just feeling bad about something you did, it's this deep-seated belief that you are fundamentally flawed.
You're bad at your core.
Right. Unlovable. And that shame drives so much of the nice guy behavior.
It's a way to overcompensate for those feelings.
Yeah, and to avoid those feelings of abandonment ever happening again.
So the child develops these coping mechanisms, these survival strategies.
Exactly. Trying to be good, trying to please everyone becomes a way to protect themselves from those painful feelings.
Because if everyone's happy with them, then they must be okay.
Right. That's the flawed logic. And the book lays out this whole nice guy paradigm. It goes something like this. If I can hide my flaws and be what everyone wants, then I'll be loved, my needs will be met, and life will be smooth sailing.
The classic recipe for disappointment. And the book dives into some specific examples, right? To really show how this plays out in real life.
Right. Like, remember Jason, putting in all this effort with his wife, helping with the baby, cleaning the kitchen.
And still, it wasn't enough.
Yeah. She'd always find something to criticize or just not seem that appreciative.
And Jason felt unloved, like he was giving more than he got.
Exactly. And sexually, he felt like he was missing out too. He just wanted to feel loved and appreciated, but he was going about it the wrong way.
And then there's Omar, right? The guy who was always helping everyone, the classic nice guy friend. But his girlfriends.
They all said the same thing. He was emotionally unavailable.
Which is so interesting because on the surface, he seems like the perfect boyfriend material. Always there to lend a hand.
Right. But being helpful doesn't automatically equal emotional intimacy.
Maybe he was using all that helping to avoid real connection.
Could be. It's a way to stay busy, to keep things superficial, to avoid being truly vulnerable.
And then you have Todd, super honest and respectful to women, tons of female friends.
But no girlfriend. Always the friend, never the boyfriend.
And he's confused because he's doing everything right, but these women keep going for the quote-unquote jerks.
Yeah, he couldn't figure it out. And this is where things get complicated, because being overly focused on being nice can actually work against you romantically.
It can make you seem too safe, too predictable.
Maybe. And it can also prevent you from showing your true self, the parts that might actually spark attraction.
Interesting. So it's like these guys are playing a role instead of just being themselves.
In a way, yeah. They're trying to be what they think women want instead of figuring out who they are and owning that.
So beyond those childhood experiences, what else contributes to this nice guy pattern?
One thing Dr. Glover talks about is how these men often react against what they saw in their own fathers.
Like if their dad was distant or angry or a cheater.
Exactly. They vow to be the opposite, but it can become an overcorrection.
So they swing too far in the other direction.
Yeah, they reject anything that seems even remotely like those negative traits, even if it's a healthy, normal aspect of being a man.
And they often gravitate towards women, right?
Yeah, they might be more comfortable relating to women than men.
And female approval becomes this, like, gold standard.
Absolutely. It becomes the way they measure their own worth.
Which, again, puts a lot of pressure on women.
It does. And it can create this, like, unhealthy dynamic where the woman holds all the power.
And when those expectations aren't met, the nice guy can get resentful.
Yeah, there can be a lot of anger underneath all that niceness.
And Dr. Glover also talks about broader societal changes, right? Like the role of fathers in the 20th century.
Right. With all the changes in the workplace, rising divorce rates, fathers became less present in their sons' lives.
So more boys were being raised primarily by women.
Exactly. And in a school system that's often dominated by women, too.
Which isn't inherently bad, but it can create a certain dynamic.
Right. It can lead to boys being more attuned to female perspectives and less exposed to healthy masculine role models.
And then the book also touches on the influence of, like, radical feminism.
Yeah. And it's a sensitive topic, for sure. But the idea is that some aspects of that movement, even unintentionally, might have reinforced the idea that traditional masculinity was inherently bad.
So some men might have internalized that message and felt like they had to suppress certain parts of themselves to be acceptable.
Yeah, they had to be nice, sensitive, non-threatening. The book even quotes Camille Paglia, who talks about this phenomenon of nice, malleable boy men being raised in what she calls subliminally matriarchal households.
Interesting. So it's this confluence of factors, personal and societal, all coming together to create this nice guy.
Right. And the big question is, how does this pattern actually manifest in their lives? What are the consequences of living with this nice guy programming?
Because it doesn't actually lead to the happy ending they're looking for, right?
Not usually.
Yeah.
Because the whole paradigm is based on flawed logic, it keeps them stuck in a cycle of trying to earn love and approval and then feeling disappointed when it doesn't work.
And what are some of those ineffective habits? The book talks about being a chameleon, right?
Yeah, that's a big one. Constantly changing their personality depending on who they're with, trying to fit in, to please everyone.
Like they act differently around their buddies than they do around their boss, than they do around a potential girlfriend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that leads to a lack of a solid sense of self. It becomes exhausting, and it prevents them from forming truly deep connections.
Because no one's really getting to know the real them.
Right. It's all surface level.
And then there's the reliance on external validation, right? Like getting their sense of worth from things outside themselves.
Yeah, that's another biggie. It can be possessions, achievements, their job title, even their family.
Like Cal, who was always fishing for compliments about how well his daughter was dressed.
Exactly. He was getting his self-esteem from his daughter's appearance, instead of from his own internal sense of worth.
And that's never going to be truly fulfilling.
No, because it's always dependent on something outside of your control.
And then there's the whole issue of seeking approval from women, which we touched on earlier.
Yeah, that can become almost an obsession for some nice guys. They put women on a pedestal and see their approval as the ultimate validation.
And that can create some seriously unhealthy dynamics in relationships.
It can, because it gives the woman all the power, and it puts so much pressure on her to meet the nice guy's needs for affirmation.
And what happens when she doesn't?
That's when the resentment, the anger, All those suppressed feelings can start to come out.
So it can be this real emotional roller coaster,
It can. And then there's the whole thing about hiding flaws and mistakes.
which is so common, right? We all do it to some extent.
We do. But for nice guys, it's driven by that deep-seated toxic shame. They believe that any imperfection, any mistake, will confirm that they are fundamentally bad.
So they become masters of concealment.
Pretty much. They avoid anything that might expose their perceived flaws, and when they do get criticized, they often get defensive.
Like deflecting the blame.
Yeah, or pointing out other people's flaws to distract from their own. Dr. Glover calls this shame dumping.
Right. And it all comes back to that fear of being judged, of not being good enough.
Exactly.
And remember, Cal's experiment with his car. I loved that story.
The one where he intentionally didn't wash his car for weeks to see if anyone would notice.
Yeah. He was so anxious about it, convinced that people would judge him, talk about him behind his back.
But in reality, no one really cared.
No one even noticed. It was such a great illustration of how much of that fear is in our heads.
Totally. And it showed Cal that his need for external validation wasn't based on reality, but on his own internal insecurity.
So powerful. Okay, so we've painted a pretty clear picture of the nice guy and how his patterns work against him.
Right. So the big question is, what's the way out? What's the alternative?
The book talks about becoming an integrated male, right? What does that even mean?
It's about becoming a whole person, not just playing a role. It's about owning your masculinity in a healthy way,
Sure.
setting boundaries, communicating your needs directly.
And not being afraid of conflict.
Exactly. And a huge part of this is about accepting yourself, flaws and all.
Because that toxic shame is at the root of so much of it.
Absolutely. And healing that shame requires bringing those hidden parts into the light, not trying to bury them deeper.
So the first step is revealing yourself to safe people. Finding people you can trust who will accept you for who you are.
Yeah. Like therapists, support groups, close friends, especially male friends. Because one of the things nice guys often lack is strong, healthy relationships with other men.
And why is that so important?
Because they need to see that they're not alone, that other men struggle with these same issues.
And that it's okay to be vulnerable, to show your true self.
Right. And to receive support and encouragement without judgment.
Reed's story in a support group was so powerful. He was terrified to share his experience with the relapse and.
Yeah. And the peep shows.
Yeah.
He's convinced that everyone would judge him, reject him.
But they didn't.
No, they embraced him. They understood. And that was a huge turning point for him.
It showed him that he was still worthy of love and acceptance, even with his struggles.
Exactly. And that's what so many nice guys need to hear, that they don't have to be perfect to be loved.
Okay, so another big theme is prioritizing your own needs, which I think is something a lot of nice guys struggle with.
Big time. Because they've been conditioned to put everyone else first.
Remember Lars? He was so uncomfortable with the idea of putting himself first. He thought it was selfish.
Yeah, he had this image of his dad who was very self-centered, and he didn't want to be like that.
But it's not about becoming your dad,
Yeah.
right? It's about finding a healthy balance.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that your needs are important too, and that it's okay to take care of yourself.
Because if you're constantly running on empty, you're not going to be much good to anyone.
Right. And that's where the victim triangle comes in.
Where the nice guy becomes the martyr, always giving, never receiving.
Yeah. And that leads to resentment, frustration, and eventually those not-so-nice outbursts.
The victim pukes, as the book calls them.
Exactly. The passive-aggressive comments, the temper tantrums, the affairs.
And remember Shane and Raquel? That was such a classic example.
He was constantly trying to please her, to fix her problems, to make her happy.
But she just felt smothered.
Yeah, she needed space to breathe.
And when Shane finally started prioritizing his own needs, things actually got better between them.
She felt less pressure, less controlled, and their relationship became more balanced, more intimate.
So counterintuitive, right? That taking care of yourself can actually lead to a better relationship.
It can, because you're showing up as a whole person, not just an extension of the other person.
And that's attractive. Okay, and then there's reclaiming personal power, which feels so crucial. Like that story you told about Elizabeth calling you a wimp.
Oh, man. That was rough. But it was a wake-up call. I realized I was letting her walk all over me and that I had given away my power.
And a lot of nice guys do that, right? They try to control situations, to manipulate people into being happy with them, instead of just owning their own choices and setting boundaries.
Yeah. And they get stuck in that memory fear where past experiences, like maybe being criticized by a parent, keep them from speaking up or taking action.
Like Gil. who's constantly trying to fix his girlfriend.
Yeah, Barb. He thought he was helping her, but really he was just trying to control her.
And their relationship really improved when he finally let go.
He realized he couldn't change her. He could only change himself. And that's a huge step towards reclaiming your power.
And setting boundaries, right.
Absolutely. Nice guys are notorious for having weak boundaries. They say yes to everything. They avoid conflict at all costs. They let people take advantage of them.
Because they think it's what a nice person does.
Yeah. But it just leads to resentment and a lack of respect. Like, remember Jake and Keisha?
Oh, yeah. That was a tough one. With her cheating and the drinking, it was a mess.
He kept making excuses for her, trying to fix her, thinking he could change her.
But nothing changed until he finally drew a line in the sand.
Exactly. He
Yeah.
said, this is what I will and will not tolerate.
And surprisingly, that's when she finally started to take responsibility for her actions.
Yeah, because he showed her that he wasn't going to enable her anymore. He valued himself enough to walk away.
Powerful stuff. And the book has a whole section on reclaiming masculinity, right? Which I think is so important in our current culture.
It is. Because there's been so much negativity around traditional masculinity in recent years.
And nice guys often buy into that. They reject anything that seems remotely masculine because they associate it with the negative traits they're trying to avoid.
Right, so they end up rejecting a whole part of themselves.
And they miss out on the positive aspects of masculinity, the strength, the leadership, the protectiveness.
Exactly. And they also miss out on the camaraderie and support of other men.
Like, remember Alan? He joined that men's group and started playing softball with some guys, and it actually improved his marriage.
Yeah, because he was finally getting his emotional needs met in healthy ways, and he wasn't putting so much pressure on his wife to fulfill all his needs.
And it helped him break free from that unhealthy enmeshment with his mother, which is something the book talks about too.
Yeah, that can be a big issue for nice guys. They never really separate from their mothers emotionally, so they're always looking for that motherly approval from other women.
It's like they're stuck in this perpetual adolescence.
Kind of.
Yeah.
And Dr. Glover encourages men to reconnect with their fathers or to find healthy male role models to learn from.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, but to bring it back to the core question, why do nice guys struggle to find the love they want?
I think it comes down to a few key things. First, that toxic shame keeps them from being truly intimate and vulnerable.
Because if they let people see the real them, they think they'll be rejected.
Right. And then there's the tendency to recreate the same unhealthy relationship patterns they learned in childhood.
Like, if their mother was critical and controlling, they might unconsciously choose partners who are similar.
Exactly. And they often struggle to end relationships, even when they're unhappy.
Because they're afraid of hurting the other person.
Yeah. Or they're afraid of being alone. Or they just keep hoping things will magically get better.
So it's this whole web of self-sabotaging behaviors, all rooted in that fear of not being good enough.
Right. And the key to breaking free is to start believing that you are good enough, just as you are.
That you don't have to earn love and approval.
Exactly. And that's what allows you to set boundaries, to be assertive, to prioritize your own needs.
Like George, who finally stopped trying to please Susan all the time.
And ironically, that's when she started appreciating him more.
Because he was being authentic. He was being himself.
Right. And that's what ultimately attracts healthy love.
And the book really emphasizes that self-confidence is the greatest aphrodisiac.
It is. Because when you believe in yourself, you don't need to seek validation from others.
And you're not afraid to be vulnerable.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the book wraps up with this whole section on getting the life you want, not just the love you want.
And it starts with this really powerful question. If you could have anything you wanted in life, what would it be?
No limits, no holding back. What's your ideal life?
And then it asks, are you creating that life right now? And if not, why not?
Because so many nice guys, despite being talented and capable, aren't living up to their full potential.
They're playing it safe, following the rules, trying to please everyone.
Yeah. And they're afraid to take risks, to go after what they really want. Because they're afraid of failing. They're afraid of being criticized.
And it all comes back to that distorted self-image, right? That belief that they're not good enough, not worthy.
Exactly. And the antidote to that is to start facing those fears.
Like Charlie, who is terrified of flying.
But he knew it was his passion, so he took lessons, he got his license, and he finally overcame his fear.
And it gave him the courage to impress other areas of his life where he was holding back.
So the message is, Stop waiting for permission.
Mm.
Stop waiting for someone to tell you it's okay to be yourself, to pursue your dreams.
Just go for it.
Exactly. And Dr. Glover offers some specific strategies for making that happen, like letting go of the need to do everything perfectly.
Because perfectionism is just another form of procrastination.
It is. And it keeps you stuck.
He also talks about the importance of asking for help, which is something a lot of nice guys resist.
Yeah, they think they have to do it all themselves. But asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
And it can be incredibly liberating.
Like Phil, who is always trying to be the strong, silent type.
But he finally worked up the courage to ask his wife for more sex.
And to his surprise, she was happy to oblige.
And then he asked his friends to help him fix up his house, which he'd been putting off for years.
And that simple act of asking for help opened up a whole new world for him.
It showed him that he didn't have to do it all alone.
Right, and that people were actually willing to support him.
So powerful. Okay, so to wrap things up, let's zoom out and recap the big picture. We've dived into this idea of nice guy syndrome, what it is, where it comes from, and how it plays out in men's lives.
We've talked about how this pattern of seeking approval, avoiding conflict, and prioritizing others' needs often stems from those early childhood experiences and that deep-seated toxic shame.
And how those patterns, while well-intentioned, ultimately lead to unhappiness, frustration, and unfulfilling relationships.
The good news is, there's a way out.
The book lays out a path towards becoming an integrated male, a man who owns his masculinity, sets healthy boundaries, and creates a life that's truly fulfilling.
As you've been listening to all this, think about whether any of these patterns resonate with you or with men you know.
Because this understanding can be a powerful tool for personal growth and for creating stronger, healthier relationships.
Absolutely.
So we've given you a lot to chew on here. We hope this deep dive has been helpful.
One last thought. If so much of this comes down to feeling unworthy, what would happen if you decided right here, right now, that you are already enough?
Just something to ponder. Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll catch you next time.